Welcome to the Ready
Nope.
for Kindergarten.
We are not, Dr. Cook, I'm so sorry. We are not quite ready to stream. We're in standby mode.
Okay.
We are live.
Welcome to the Ready for Kindergarten Charette, hosted by the Maryland State Department of Education and the Maryland State Department, Maryland State Board of Education and the Maryland State Department of Education. My name is Shana Cook. It is my pleasure to facilitate this virtual charrette and welcome our participants and the YouTube Live viewers this evening. I'd also like to acknowledge the Maryland State Board of Education President Clarence Crawford and board member Charles Dashiell, who are joining us tonight. Thank you for joining. Many of you may be wondering, what is a charrette? A charrette is commonly used in architecture to provide a forum for diverse stakeholders to engage in creative discussion and provide immediate feedback on ideas presented. The State Board and the Maryland Department of Education are hosting strategic plan charrettes to develop, refine, and finalize the flagship programs, strategies, and initiatives that will support the realization of the priorities, enablers, and goals by working collaboratively with stakeholders. In addition to other engagement methods that the State Board and MSDE have hosted, including roundtables, listening sessions, and data walks, charrettes also ensure stakeholders are mutual authors of the strategic plan. The focus for tonight's charrette is the strategic plan priority 1, Ready for Kindergarten. First, State Superintendent of Maryland Schools, Mohammed Chowdhury, will be presenting on the State Board and MSDE's strategic plan. Then Deputy Director of Community Engagement, Lindsay Malik Mayhew, will walk us through a visioning activity, followed by Superintendent Chowdhury sharing the specific programs, strategies, and initiatives that will support the Ready for Kindergarten priority. Finally, I will facilitate a discussion with participants around the strategies, and you will have a chance to rank them by importance. Below, we will jump into the charrette activity. Before we jump into the charrette activities and discussion, it is important that you understand the strategic plan priorities, enablers, and goals that have been drafted so far participate. Superintendent Chowdhury will walk us through an overview of the strategic plan and engagement report, phases 1 and 2.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me fine? I think you can. Nod your head. There you go. Thank you for joining us today on this charrette. So before we start jumping into the charrette portion, wanted to give you an overview of how we arrived at where we are right now with our strategic plan. And so we're going to jump right in. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right. So first off, why do you need a strategic plan? Every high functioning organization has a set of focus areas that they hone in on. Doesn't mean you're not doing 1,000 other things, but there are just a set of things that you really hone in on as an organization, anchor your decision making on, your principles, your values, how you end up supporting the other work that you do. And so a strategic plan is a framework that allows us to do that. The department has not had a strategic plan in a very long time, and we need a strategic plan. So the State Board and the administration embarked on the process to develop a strategic plan in the backdrop of the policy conditions that have been created by the blueprint, and we'll talk more about the blueprint. Many of you know a lot about the blueprint, and so hoping to share that work and how the plan fits into that. Ultimately, the plan will anchor right, and support artwork to ensure the blueprint success, as well as refine it too, right? You craft a piece of legislation, you didn't think of anything, or you may have not thought about some unintended consequences. So, right, a strategic plan allows us to be able to plan for that, mitigate for that, and get things right for our kids, our educators. Next slide. So it's a windy road to get to a strategic plan by design. I like to believe all paths are windy when in terms of trying to fulfill and reach a North Star. And so our plan has been broken up into 3 phases. We are taking, normally organizations take a year to come up with a strategic plan. Some of you are currently inside districts or organizations that have a strategic plan. Some of you are in the middle of refreshing a strategic plan. Some of you have new superintendents who have come into a strategic plan. And so we decided to break it up in 3 phases, right? This was our more normal year. Last year was a return to in-person learning at scale, but there was many challenges, right, as we dealt with quarantining and other things. So we wanted to really open up the runway for it and allow for more engagement, and also allow for us to really settle into a true baseline year coming out of the pandemic. And really this year is how we see that year. We have in phase 1, we released our refined and elevated mission, vision, values statements, as well as identifying a set of priorities and enablers that we want to focus on. And we'll talk more about what enablers are. In phase 2, we came up with the measures in terms of how to measure the success around the priorities that we came up with and the enablers. Not all things are measurable, but many things are, and we wanted to hone in on that. And where we are now is phase 3, right? How are we going to pull off what we prioritize and what we're going to measure? And so what are going to be those flagship strategies and programs? As you embark on this charrette today, doesn't mean 1,000 things don't have to happen in order to pull something off, right? But I want you to think about it as more so, of those 1,000 things, what are like more big rock type things, where the other 997 things will be that much more easier if we're able to do these 3 things well. And so kind of think of the flagship programs and strategies in that way. So that's where we are. And then of course we adopt our strategic plan, and then we go into implementation and refinement over time. Next slide. Next slide is just an overview of what I already talked about. I always jump ahead and end up explaining this slide and the other slide, but essentially it explains what I described on our windy road towards publishing and adopting our strategic plan. Let's go on to the next slide. Next slide. We are in the blueprint generation, right? Amazing piece of legislation. You know, you may not agree with every policy detail, but there's no denying that it is an amazing piece of legislation, right? Look up the word amazing in the dictionary. The blueprint encompasses that. And the blueprint is amazing in the sense as in like no other state is looking at everything at the same time, right? And putting dollars in significant dollars. We can always do better, but significant, meaningful dollars, right? Putting our money where our mouth is when we value education. And it's looking at everything truly from the birth through college and career continuum. And everything is being looked at, right, at the same time to get it right. That is the power of the blueprint, right? And there are policy decisions and statutory requirements embedded in that. But there are things that also need to be figured out as we go to implementation. And so that's why, you know, I say like there's nothing else like it across the country. And then again, our leaders are investing, our taxpayers are investing significant dollars in this moment to get it right for our kids. Next slide. This is what I call our Blueprint 101 slide. You know, it's law with hundreds of pages, but this is a slide that we use to be able to just summarize the core tenets of the law, and the goals across each pillar. The blueprint is broken up by 5 pillars. Today's charrette is really honing in on and mingling within the first pillar, early childhood education. But not all strategies just live in one bucket. In early childhood education, right, the blueprint envisions, right, a mixed delivery system in partnership with our private providers, be able to expand family choice and ensure best fit options for families to have high quality early learning care, regardless of zip code and region in our state. That's the vision. Are we there yet? No, we're not. But that's what we're working to achieve. It is looking to also increase affordability for our families, right? Definitely to the greatest extent possible, getting close to that universal pre-K option for those who truly need it. And then it's also looking at doing this work in a 2-generation approach. And we'll talk more about that later, right? Through the scaling of our Patty and Judy centers, right? Where families can come and learn with their child, right? And as young as, right, at the infant stage, all the way up to going through up to kindergarten. And so that is pillar 1. Pillar 2 is about high quality, diverse and teachers and leaders, right? Exactly what the words mean there. The blueprint is looking to raise starting pay for our teachers to $60,000, which would put us at pretty much one of the highest starting pays in the country. The blueprint is looking to raise expectations at all aspects of a teacher's career, so preparation as well as induction, right? And then the career ladder. So you kind of think of the teacher's career in 3 stages, right? Your experience in becoming a teacher, right? And then once becoming a teacher, your experience in those critical early years, that's induction and being able to ensure high quality induction, where mentorship is a big facet of that. And then once you have crossed that point where you are approaching, where you are becoming a veteran, right? Being able to provide leadership opportunities as well as paid leadership opportunities. So it does not take, right, 20, 30 some years to be able to get closer to, say, 100K in terms of what teachers make. And so the career ladder looks at that. And one of the key components of the career ladder is the National Board Teacher Certification pathway that allows teachers to make incentives up to another $17,000 on top of base pay. College and career readiness, this is where everything converges in the blueprint. All students shall be college and career ready by the end of 10th grade, if not, definitely by the time they leave high school. The blueprint has required the department to commission a study to look at of setting a new college and career readiness standard by which we will deem our students college and career ready. So that study is going on. In last month's board meeting, we published an interim report. The department has contracted with American Institute of Research, who's doing that study. And then making sure all of our teaching and learning and the curricula and the assessments and the professional learning is aligned to that college and career readiness standard. And then once a student is college and career ready, or on the pathway towards becoming college ready, it's very important that that we tap into their interests and their aspirations, and that happens through the post-CCR pathways, right? Whether that is jumping into an industry that is a high demand field, right, with room for growth, right? Doing that through an apprenticeship and earning an industry recognized credential by the time they leave high school, or they want to go off to college and being able to provide dual credit and advanced placement opportunities, or being able to earn an associate's degree by the time they graduate, right? And then the blueprint also brings back, right, the importance of and elevating right alongside college equally, right, career technical education as well. And that's why the apprenticeship piece is big in the blueprint. The blueprint has a goal of 45% of our statewide graduates will have had an apprenticeship and or earned an industry recognized credential under their belt. Today, that baseline is 7%. So to give you a sense of the journey we have ahead of us in order to be able to fulfill the blueprint goals. More resources for student success is exactly what it sounds like. It's about adequacy. The blueprint, one of the amazing things about it is the Kerwin Commission met for 3 years to think about what is it going to cost to propel our education system to be the best for our kids? And that required looking at adequacy. Now, can we do better? Absolutely, we can do better. But the fact that there was looking at adequacy and creating things like the concentration of poverty grant that triggers the community school model and creating higher weights for students who are historically disadvantaged, that's a very significant thing. And so over a 10-year period, that's going to phase up and ramp up and make Maryland students both on top of base per pupil, on top of the weights, right? If you are an economically disadvantaged student who is also an English learner, right? Those bases are going to be some of the highest in the country over time. And then finally, governance and accountability. We are putting intense resources into our systems. It does matter that we pull this off well and that there are smart accountability guardrails along the way. Every school system is to have a blueprint implementation plan. Part one of those blueprint implementation plan, or phase one, I should say, was submitted in March of 2023, and those are on the verge of going through reviews and ultimately AIB approval, and then making sure that ultimately the department and other governmental entities are held accountable to be able to do this well and get this work right. So that's the Blueprint 101. Let's go on to the next slide. We wanted to make sure that we set a new precedent for engagement, and that's what we set out to do with the state board. And we decided to have multiple ways to do it. And so you are seeing our methods of engagement. The charrette is a new element that we've added. And of course, we did not limit our engagement just to virtual sessions. We did regional data and gallery walks. We had community conversations. The department has a community engagement team that had not existed before. So we come and show up to events, right? We ask to be invited to parties other than just holding our own parties and being able to engage with our stakeholders. We put out a statewide survey where many of our priorities and such were shaped from. So a multi-pronged approach to being able to meet our stakeholders where they're at in the method that works best for them. Next slide, please. These are just all of our buckets of stakeholders in terms of who have engaged to date. Here are some metrics that you can see, right? You can see we are now well over 50 plus hours of in-depth dialogue. You can see in our MSD YouTube channel all of the roundtable discussions that we've had. It was very important to us that we also expanded the tent of voices, that it wasn't just a singular set of voices who were driving policy. It's important that we expand the tent, especially for those who reflect the demographic of our children and Maryland, especially those who have been historically underserved. And then we have a statewide survey that we are hoping to, it is getting closer and closer. Our goal is to be able to get to 50K. And we have basically went all out in terms of what we are looking to do when it comes to shaping our decision making. This doesn't end here. Even after the plan, we continue to engage during the implementation phase. Next slide. Next slide. So in phase one, as I shared, we released our elevated mission and vision statement at the state board and department level. Won't read every single one, but I'll read our mission, right? We will ensure a rigorous and world-class educational experience for every Maryland student in every neighborhood that prepares each to be college and career ready through strategic direction and leadership, policymaking and resource allocation, and engagement and advocacy, right? It's important to think about the role of the state board and the department, right? Ultimately, we don't operate, right? We set policy conditions, we allocate resources, we come up with regulatory decisions, and we got to get that right. And those create the conditions for our educators on the ground to be able to innovate, to be thrive, to be able to get results for kids. And so when you look at our mission, right, it's anchored in the tools that we have to be able to get it right, in collaboration with our stakeholders on the ground. Next slide, please. These are our renewed values at the state board and department level. I won't read every single one, but it ranges from accountability to transformation. I'll read accountability. We will take responsibility for our commitments and maintain open, transparent, and responsive communication on academic, operational, and financial policies and outcomes. I'll read equity. We will do whatever it takes to eliminate barriers to success and provide the necessary resources and supports to ensure that every Maryland student achieves at the highest level. And then I'll read transformation. We will pursue best-in-class outcomes through bold, impactful actions to ensure that every student has the tools, resources, supports, and opportunities they need to thrive. I've been thinking a lot about the equity one lately. I think it's not just doing whatever it takes and getting our students what they need to be successful. It's also getting them what they need and doing whatever it takes when they need it, right? The intervention at the right moment matters as well too. And so I've been thinking about that definition and whether we need to evolve that somewhat. Next slide, please. Our strategic plan priorities and enablers are truly designed across the continuum of a child's development as they go through the pre-K-12 system. So that's how I want you to think about it as we present our priorities. And so today's Ready for Kindergarten is at the beginning step of that continuum, right? Everything that needs to happen to be ready for kindergarten. Next slide, please. So here are our priorities. I won't read every single one. This deck is available to you, or we can make it available to you, but all Maryland students are prepared socially, emotionally, and academically for success in kindergarten, right? All Maryland students are proficient in reading by the end of third grade. We know the power that literacy has, especially early literacy, especially that shift from learning to read to reading to learn. And those who are not have the necessary supports to become proficient, because we know it gets harder and harder and harder to narrow those challenges as students get older. So this is in terms of our priorities and that continuum of work that we're looking at. And of course, everything converges on ensuring that our students are college and career ready and ultimately be able to graduate with a pathway that they are proud of, that they've gone through, whether they are jumping into career or college. Next slide. Enablers. We know that our priorities need reinforcements, right? Enablers are those structural conditions, those other things that also need to be true in order to make sure that kids are ready for kindergarten or kids are able to read by the end of 10th grade. So that's how I want you to think about enablers. Let's look at where we are currently in terms of our thinking. Next slide. I won't read every single one, but enabler 3, Maryland is elevating the stature of the teaching profession by intentionally working to attract, recruit, and retain a highly qualified and diverse workforce, setting rigorous standards for educator preparation programs and induction, and implementing a career ladder system focused on development and growth opportunities for educators. Again, thinking across that whole continuum, right? Those 3 big phases of a teacher's career, right? Preparing to become a teacher, those critical early years. And then as you shift from becoming a novice to a veteran teacher, right, being able to have leadership opportunities around that. Enabler 4, right, thinking beyond just academics, right, being able to make sure that we get all of the wraparound components right as well too, because we know that matters, especially for our educators who teach in schools with high concentrations of poverty or schools that are in historically disadvantaged communities. Wraparound services play a crucial role at that level. So making sure that we get that right as well too. So these are our enablers. Again, I won't read all of them, but you can definitely take a look at them. Let's go on to the next slide. We wanted to make sure that we can measure our success, track our success, both in the interim and the long term. It does matter, right? We need to know that it's working. And so we wanted to make sure that we looked at a set of metrics that we can both objectively collect, as well as be able to assess and modify our strategies over time to get it right for our children. Next slide. So these are our current goals and metrics for our priorities, and then we have some for our enablers. So you saw the priorities, right? Ready for kindergarten, ready to read, right? So we looked at our existing data sets and what we have and whether or not there were any gaps in data sets. So I won't read all of them, but increase the percentage of students who are demonstrating at the readiness level on the KRA, right? That is something taken in the fall for our students who start kindergarten, right? And everything that happens leading up to that level, school clearly has an influence in terms of their readiness level. Let's look at our third P3, our priority 3, which is ready for high school, middle school, something near and dear to me, decrease in the percentage of grade 8 students that met one or more of the following ABC indicators. There's a lot of strong research around early warning indicators around attendance, behavior, and course credit. You can definitely look at early warning indicators early on, and it can have a profound impact on whether or not student will be successful. So again, going back to that definition of equity, getting students what they need when they need it matters immensely. Both of those things matter. And so Bob Balfans here in Johns Hopkins has done powerful research around the ABCs and what that looks like. It's not anything new, right? It's more about executing well, and we've known for decades being able to act upon ABC and early warning indicator systems. So these are our goals and metrics in terms of what we're thinking about. Next slide. We are also looking at, for our enablers, having a set of goals and metrics as well. So let's look at E4. That was that wraparound service enabler, right? Increase the percentage of schools perceived as having a favorable learning environment and decrease in suspension rate. Maryland is one of the few states in the country that has a statewide staff and student survey that is given. It is still fairly new, so we want to pressure test it more to make sure that we look at all the domains and which domains have the strongest correlative factor in driving academics as well. So we're going to do that work as well. These are our metrics for enablers. One more that I will read is E3, the stature of raising the stature of the teaching profession. Again, we're thinking across that continuum. So one, increasing the percentage of new teachers of color as measured by the fall staff collection report, increasing the percent of teachers retained over a 3-year period. That's those critical early years and that induction experience. And then that career ladder phase of your career, increase the percentage of teachers eligible for the teacher leadership track of the career ladder. That teacher leadership track is defined in the blueprint legislation. Next slide. We also wanted to look at other metrics as well. We want to make sure that we are leaning in and hugging and supporting our low-performing schools, right? And decreasing those low-performing schools over time, right? And the same schools cannot keep appearing over and over and over on the list. That is not okay. And we should be able to do the work to make sure that those schools do not remain in that status, and it should not take more than 3 years to be able to get this work right. We are also obsessive about cohort data. Ultimately, every cohort that comes after the other cohort should get the best version of ourselves. So over time, our students becoming learning more over time. If you look at cohort data for literacy, our cohorts are gaining over time, right? From one teacher to the next, etc. But if you look at cohort data for math, they're actually losing learning. And so that is something that's important. Huge fan of cohort data and being able to look at that. Our accountability system currently doesn't give credit for cohort data, but that's just something we're also thinking about as well. Next slide. Next slide. So this is where we are, right? Phase 3, you see phase 1 and 2 grayed out. That's because we are here now trying to think about what are the strategies we need to lean into, and how does that, what are those flagship things, right? What are the things that we both at the state level, at the state board level, at the department level, again, we don't directly operate, but in terms of the tools and the policy conditions that we can set, what are the right set of conditions to incentivize and reinforce the strategies that will drive the needle across those goals and metrics? Next slide. Please, if you have not taken the survey, please do take the survey. We are going to leave it open. Many of our priorities, as well as from our roundtables and our different engagement strategies that we've deployed, as well as the survey, has shaped our thinking. And so definitely encourage you to take this. If you have not taken it, continue to take it. We are leaving it open for some time. And so we want to make sure that we capture the greatest amount of thinking and thoughts in it. Next slide. And with that, I think we're going to begin to shift to the visioning activity with the team, and then we'll come back and we'll do an introduction to the set of strategies we're thinking about, and then we will start the charrette portion of our day today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Chowdhury. I definitely learned a lot from that and hope our participants and our viewers on YouTube Live did as well. Now that we have a better understanding of the strategic plan components that have been drafted so far, we want you to imagine what a future 5 years from now, where the Ready for Kindergarten strategic planning priority is a reality. So we're going to do a brief visualization activity. I'm going to provide some prompts for you to imagine this future in detail. I'll make sure that I'm pausing after each prompt to give you a moment to record your ideas in Slido. So you can see we've got the link in the chat for everyone. You can go ahead and click on that now. So do that before we get started, and make sure you're clicking on the Ideas tab at the top of the screen on Slido. This is where you'll write down all your ideas after I give you the prompts, and just make sure to press send so your idea actually submits. And you can actually like other people's ideas. If nothing is coming to you, or you're writing your own ideas and you see something that you like, go ahead and press the thumbs up. So let's go ahead and get started. If you're comfortable, you can close your eyes and imagine yourself 5 years from now sitting in an auditorium. The future U.S. Secretary of Education is honoring a significant education accomplishment. The Secretary says, "At no time in the history of the U.S. has a state transformed their early learning program so quickly. The overwhelming majority of Maryland kindergartners are now demonstrating readiness to enter kindergarten prepared for social, emotional, and academic success. Additionally, Maryland has nearly closed all achievement gaps so that student outcomes are no longer correlated with race, ethnicity, family's income, or zip code. It is my honor to commemorate this great achievement today. We need to learn how Maryland transformed their approach to kindergarten readiness so other states can follow their lead. Here's a short video on what they did." The secretary steps away from the podium and a video starts. It shows images of students in a pre-kindergarten classroom setting 5 years from now. Imagine, what are the students doing? What is the teacher doing? How does the space look and feel? What does it sound like? Record your ideas. We're envisioning what the pre-kindergarten classroom 5 years from now with the Ready for Kindergarten priority fully implemented. What does that look like? Record your ideas in Slido and make sure you press send. We'll start to see those pop up shortly. All right, next in the video, you see the principal or the private pre-K program owner appear on the screen. They describe the program-wide initiatives that led to students' increase in kindergarten readiness. They say, "We really started to see drastic improvement once we implemented." What initiatives does the principal or pre-K program owner describe next? Write this down in Slido. Make sure you press send to submit the idea. You can also like some of the ideas that are already in Slido. Finally, the video concludes with a child engaged in activities that reinforce foundational skills in the home setting. Who are they with? What are they doing? Describe what the scene looks, feels, and sounds like. Write your ideas in Slido. Again, you can upvote various ideas that resonate with you. We're going to take just a few moments now to, you can open your eyes if you were closing them. That was our visualization. Go ahead and take a few seconds to look through the ideas that are already there, and you can go ahead and upvote those if something is resonating with you. And let's look at the first few that we have. Okay, we've got some that are liked. So diverse and inclusive classrooms. Yes, definitely. I think you're going to see many of the strategies point to that. There's a lot of overlap, collaboration, coaching. Students are engaged, playing and learning with one another. There's definitely alignment there with some of the strategies that we're about to learn about. So let's jump right into those. We have a lot of information that we are going to try to give you in a short amount of time. We've got about 15 minutes for the strategy presentation. But now that you've imagined this future where we reach our goal to increase the number of students who met the kindergarten readiness standard, we want to share with you these potential flagship strategies and programs that can help the state board and MSDE achieve the goal. The department is going to implement many strategies, and we'll launch several programs and initiatives to support the Ready for Kindergarten priority. But today we're asking you to think through and prioritize just the ones that the public can really rally around. So in the presentation that Superintendent Chaudhry is about to go over, we'll be sharing with you the most important strategies that will support the Ready for Kindergarten priority. And then following the presentation, hopefully we will have about 40 minutes, depending on how long this takes, to discuss and rank these. So I'll pass it back over to Superintendent Chaudhry. Thank you.
All right, let's jump right in to give you some background on what we are thinking when it comes to our flagship strategies, programs, and initiatives. Many of the strategies, right, we have direction from the blueprint, right? And some of them are strategies that we're also building in right alongside it to make sure that we even get it even that much more right, when it comes to implementation. First off, many of you know this already. We know how critical the early years are. The research is very clear. I became a dad towards the end of my first year, and now I'm in my second year of my superintendency, and I see it. You know, I knew the research, but I see it now and experience it, right? And just a significant amount of brain development happens during those critical early years, and that many things that happen around the child, both within and outside the home and within the opportunities they have an impact on that. And so being able to get it right early on is important towards getting it right for our kids down the line, right? And so that's very important. Let's go on to the next slide. So what have our stakeholders been saying when it comes to the engagement work that we've been doing in the various settings? So many of our stakeholders went through our survey has said that it is absolutely important that we think about beyond academics, that we think about the social, emotional, and mental health supports and make that a top priority, not just in the upper grades, but also down to the early grades as well, and making sure that is something that is front and center. During our roundtable discussions, participants have advocated for greater investment in teacher training at the early childhood level, as well as focusing on retaining quality teachers, right? Both matters, right? And then in our listening sessions, participants have welcomed the resources made available by the blueprint for broadening the availability and expanding access to pre-K and early childhood programs. And so making sure that we're able to use and leverage this moment of an influx of resources to be able to strategically grow our early learning opportunities across the state. Next slide. So again, the priority that we are discussing today and doing our charrette around is our first priority, which is Ready for Kindergarten, right? All Maryland students are prepared socially, emotionally, and academically for success in kindergarten. Next slide. The goals and metrics, right, that we have set for this priority is increasing the percentage of our kindergartners every year that are demonstrating readiness level on the KRA, and making sure that we're able to raise that over time, right, as we get new cohorts of students going through rich, meaningful, high quality early learning experiences in our state. Next slide. Let's talk about the strategies, right? I want to first give some context when it comes to the things that are directionally made possible through the blueprint. So one is making sure that our counties are increasing the percentage of slots on opportunities that they have in terms of servicing our 3- and 4-year-olds, as well as expanding beyond that as well. And so making sure that our counties are invested in that and are thinking strategically about that growth over time. It is also very important that it is done in a mixed delivery context, right? What that means is our school systems are partnering with private providers to provide families with choice and options in order to put their child in the best fit early learning environment, but all are equally have quality markers, but they might have different themes, right? This past session, we had a statute passed to be able to pilot more early learning opportunities that prioritize outdoor learning, for example. That's not for every family, but it might be for some. Making sure that we are expanding pre-K in a way that also is able to subsidize costs. Obviously, being able to have no cost for families that are the highest need, but also being able to subsidize costs for families who may not be making the traditional cut point or cut off for being able to get subsidized need, but being able to add that help as well, because it matters. We know the cost of childcare has increased for families over time, and that is still something we have not solved nationally as a country, as well as any state at scale. And then finally, there is a goal that the blueprint has said, that the blueprint envisions that we are having our pre-K settings happen in a 50-50 manner ultimately, and having that over time, regardless of county, meaning that 50% of those seats are happening within a public setting at the school system level, and the other half happening at the private provider setting as well. And so that's the goal. We're not there yet, but that is the directional goal that the blueprint has set. Let's go on to the next slide. In terms of what mixed delivery looks like, it's not something new that Maryland came up with. It is something that is happening across the country at varying levels, right? Again, the blueprint envisions a mixed delivery system where public and private providers co-deliver high quality early learning, right? And they are done in partnership, right? Which means that they are learning together, they are communicating, they are engaging, they're possibly sharing space with one another, right? I was just out in Talbot County, and there is a school that shares space with the private providers where there's an early learning setting in one part of the wing, and then as well as the traditional school, public school happening in another place. So you can look in a wide variety of ways, and those settings are very important in order to extend our reach, and as well as options for our families that work for them and our best fit. Let's go on to the next slide. Here is just a view nationally in terms of what the mixed delivery work looks like. Obviously, it looks different in different states, but it is not something that just was cooked up in a lab, right? The mixed delivery concept is happening across the country at varying levels and at different and defined in different ways. So and there's a wide variety of lessons learned. Some states started ahead of Maryland, some are barely starting out, and some are right where we're at. And so that is something we have a lot of places to learn from. So I think that's a plus, right? But no one can say like we are the model, right? And lots of research studies and work is being done to do that. And the department has an obligation to make sure that we are constantly benchmarking against what is working and that fits the needs of our communities and our students and our families. Next slide. So wanted to give you some examples and case studies. DC, our neighbor, has been doing work around a mixed delivery system for a while. They did a rigorous supply and demand study to actually determine where locations could go, right? That matters. Strategically thinking out like, okay, where is an actual desert? Where are we low on providers who are not as of high quality, and we need to both support them to raise their quality, but also replicate more models of quality in that region. And so DC has done a lot of work in this area to be able to continue to raise the level of options as well as care for families, as well as the quality. So this is just one example of a case study. Next slide. West Virginia, another neighbor not too far away, has a universal application system, an enrollment process that is centralized, that allows families to choose the options, right, that is best fit for them. And so rather than navigate multiple forms or multiple deadlines and such like that, so being able to access the mixed delivery system through a centralized process. Again, each version of a mixed delivery system has some type of lesson learned or implication. Lesson learned on something maybe to try, lesson learned on something to not to do because it didn't go so well. And so it goes both ways. Next slide. We already have some work happening when it comes to mixed delivery and private providers working, both before the blueprint, as well as in these critical early years of the blueprint. So here are just some examples, right? Like Frederick County invites private providers to professional learning opportunities, provides curriculum materials and resources to private providers, including licensing seats to a digital tool used by the school system that supports phonics instruction. Montgomery County conducts monthly partner meetings with private providers, hired a position to work specifically with community partners, right? Let's go on to the next slide. So our school systems are in different places, right? As part of their March 23 Blueprint Comprehensive Plan session, they had to take where they're at now and commit to going even deeper and meaningfully building out the mixed delivery system. We're not there yet, but that's the goal, right? And so one of our key fundamental strategies is ensuring that we pull off the mixed delivery system well. The blueprint also sets direction on income requirements. And it thinks of it in tiers. Tier 1 being our families in most need, and then it begins to envision another set of tiers where we're beginning to subsidize the cost of care through something called a sliding scale model. That sliding scale, we'll talk more about the sliding scale has not been set yet, but that is something that is coming down the line that the department has been charged with to be able to figure out. Let's go on to the next slide. Here's what the sliding scale work ultimately entails. The sliding scale ultimately looks to make sure by fiscal year 2025, our families in tier 2, right, there is a sliding scale in terms of the level of subsidies being able to offer. Right. It is very important that we get it right. There are always design constraints, right? You have to think about what it's going to cost the state and what is available, right? And what is sustainable long term, right? But the blueprint envisioned getting as close as possible to universal pre-K, but not just fully just blanket universal pre-K that is just covered, right? There is still a cost to families, but being able to subsidize to the greatest extent possible where it makes sense in a sustainable and financial way that enables the state to sustain it long term. We recently, not too long ago, raised raise the level of scholarships that we provide for families within going from 65% to 75% of the state median income, which was a big deal. This past legislative session, there was a bill that passed that seeks to preserve, basically mandates to preserve some of the key things that we've been able to do during our ESSER dollar, the era of ESSER dollars that has supported our ability to do these things. And so that is something that does make us a leader in terms of where we are. We could do better, but it's important to know that in this era of ESSER, one-time ESSER dollars, that will be going away as we reach a fall of 24, that our state is committed to keeping the pandemic era level of subsidized care in place. Next slide. So the next strategy, now shifting from, the mixed delivery and cost of care and sliding scale, the blueprint gives direction on a two-generation approach. A two-generation approach is exactly what it sounds like. It is something that has multiplier effects, right? We support our families, we support our students, right? And so making sure that we're able to do that, especially in the early learning setting, and doing that in partnership is going to have significant effects in terms of our students' long-term trajectory. Let's go on to the next slide. The blueprint gives the charge to expand on a concept of the two-generation approach that Maryland has had a long history with, and that is through the expansion of Judy Centers. That is one of the strategies. Judy Centers essentially allow our families that are placed strategically in Title I schools across the state. I recently got to see one being built next to Greensboro Elementary in Caroline County, beautiful facility next to a beautiful building in Caroline County, serving a significantly disadvantaged population with with high needs, making sure that they absolutely have the support that they need to be successful. And so that is essentially what Judy Centers are looking to do, being able to bring our families in and support our student learning. I was able to visit a Judy Center in Snow Hill Elementary in Worcester County, where they do home visits, and when they go do lessons and help the family being able to do very practical things that are not hard to do, that reinforce the learning happening at the school level. And so lots of power in this two-generation approach. Next slide. Here's what the number of Judy Centers look like. The blueprint provides funding for us to expand Judy Centers. The department accelerated because we had more eligible applicants to be able to launch more during, and so we used some of our ESSER dollars to launch more. We are definitely trending over 100 Judy Centers in the near future. But as you can see, they are spread out all across our state. Next strategy in terms of deploying the Judy Center the two-generation concept is Patty Centers. Patty Centers distinguish themselves and they specifically focus at the younger level, so 0 to 3 versus 0 to 5 at the Judy Center level. Similar elements when it comes to the offerings that they have. Obviously, they can be cited in different places, whereas Judy Centers are cited in Title I schools, but just wanted you to get a sense of another level of wraparound service delivery that the state has, that the blueprint envisions and supports us in expanding. Next slide. Here's what the Patty Centers look like. Again, not spreading as fast as Judy Centers, but again, Judy Centers are not limited just to the school system. A Judy Center that is running well should also be partnering with private providers and being able to offer support and services. Same thing with the Patty Center approach as well, but just wanted to give you a sense of what that looks like. Less Patty Centers than Judy Centers, but both are the blueprint envisions and charges the department with expansion on. Next slide. Let's talk about, we talked about the mixed delivery system infrastructure and ensuring the cost of care to the greatest extent possible is not a burden to our families. We talked about the importance of the two-generation approach. Let's talk about what actually happens instructionally, because that matters as well. And so we want to make sure that our early learning environments are absolutely operating regardless of the type of setting, that are rich and developmentally appropriate, and ensuring that our students are developing academically, socially, and emotionally and thriving. And so there's a lot of strong research around what elements exist in terms of defining quality early learning environments, many of which we've known for decades, many of which we've begun to know more about. One of the key elements that we need to lean more into is ensuring a professional and stable teacher workforce. You can't get quality if you don't have a stable and well-compensated workforce, right? Early childhood teachers are still not paid at the level that they need to be paid given the complexity of their job. Very, very complex job. I was a secondary teacher and one of my best friends was a pre-K teacher. There's no way I could do what she does. And there's no way what she could do, I do at the middle school level. That's why we have two different personalities to be able to provide that quality, but we don't the current value that we place in terms of if we were to just take financial investments and pay, we essentially are saying there's a devaluing of early learning teachers than our upper grades, and that's just unacceptable. Again, compensation and preparation that reflects the expertise and importance of the early learning workforce, and that's something that we can improve and should improve over time. Unfortunately, I can't do it with a snap of a finger. There's a lot of other things that need to happen, but that is something that we need to get right if we want a high quality environment. So just want to call out that element. Next slide. The importance of academically rich environments that are rooted in evidence-based pedagogy with play. That is essentially the secret sauce of early learning, right? Intentional, high quality learning through play that is also rooted in evidence-based pedagogy. They do not have to live in conflict with each other. And frankly, an quite high quality learning environment brings the best of both together. And so being able to make sure that we are at the department level are promoting and sustaining and incentivizing early learning environments that do that, that get that right, making sure that the element of play as a framework for learning, and ensuring that also what we know about early literacy and how that works, all of that is coming together and converging, and there's the necessary supports to do that. So that is another very important piece when it comes to our strategies. Next slide. Early learning standards. Maryland is currently in the middle of revamping its early learning standards. We've had guidelines, but it's been our early learning standards ultimately need to encompass that element of play and evidence-based pedagogy, and it all needs to converge in this early learning standards framework. So we're in the middle of doing that right now. We're engaging stakeholders. We're not wanting to rush it. We want to make sure we get it right, but this is going to be a critical year where we do want to unveil it. One of the key things that we're doing is expanding the level, the continuum of the early learning. So not bucketing all age groups under one and thinking those strategies are appropriate for someone who's in the young infants versus the mobile infants phase. There is a huge difference. I just thought the other day, my daughter was like, man, she was a young infant. Now she's definitely a mobile infant and running around the house, and I have to make sure that she doesn't crash into something. It's very, very different and what that looks like. And so making sure we get that right. And then here are some proposed domains in terms of what we're thinking based on our current stakeholder feedback. Next slide. Let's talk a little bit about early learning standards. It's not something new. Many states have already adopted them. We are actually behind on the curve on this. So, but what's good is we can learn from other states to further evolve ours. Here's an example of DC's. You can see they have more domains, and then their levels you can see is also focused on a wide variety of stages at early in the early learning settings for kids and that are developmentally appropriate. Next slide, please. Here is Washington State, who is another state that adopted early learning standards going back to 2012. So they are over a decade old. But again, you can see with them, they even have another set of age groupings. Each one is a little different from the others, but ultimately the key thing is acknowledging the different phases of a child's development in the early childhood era of their life, and then making sure that the domains are truly looking at both academic, socially, and emotionally in terms of a student's development. Let's go on to the next slide. We are in the middle, again, as I stated, of developing, of refining and evolving and ultimately setting an early learning standards for Maryland. Our Division of Early Childhood is continuing to engage our stakeholders and be able to shape where we're going. So just something to keep in mind in terms of a key strategy for us in terms of what happens in terms of instruction in the early learning setting. Next slide. Another key component to being able to ensure high quality early learning spaces is quality rating improvement systems, right? And for many of you who already know, in Maryland, that's Maryland Excels. Our Maryland Excels also needs an upgrade. We'll just say it that way, and that work is also underway right now. But the quality rating improvement system looks at a early learning setting beyond just what's happening in the classroom, but also looking at other structural elements, whether it's in the family child care setting or the center setting or the public school setting. And so here are just core elements of a QRIS system. It's not a new concept. There have been several across the country, but many people are revisiting them to see if they have had their intended effect or not. But let's look at what Maryland's current system, Maryland Excel, looks like. Let's go on to the next slide. Here's the domains. When it comes to Maryland Excel's, Blueprint did definitely go all into Maryland Excel, saying that it does envision a quality rating level of 4 and above up to a certain point. We're not there yet, but that is something that it does envision. And currently the Excel system has these set of domains, again, looking beyond just what's happening in the learning part of it, but also looking at other aspects of the early learning setting in which the child is in. Next slide. Here's what our current just baselines look like, right? As you can see in 2022, less than 12% of our providers who are participating are in the level 4 and 5 range. And there's a wide variety of reasons for that, right? The incentive to be able to move up, is that there? And is it differentiated in just the right way when you think about a family childcare provider versus a bigger center, right? And what does that look like? And so we are using this moment to look at that. And that's why I said it is due for an upgrade, but the concept of having one is important. Next slide. The Blueprint is going all in, as I said, by incentivizing a participation in Maryland Excels. Many of you may already know that the bonus structure in Excels has increased significantly, right? And depending on the size of your setting, right? So we're thinking from a range of $450 to approaching almost $5,000 at that highest level for a certain category and setting. And so that incentive piece is there, which is great. But again, the ability to move up and what that looks like needs to be also thought of in different settings. I am saying that out loud here. I am a proponent of having this system, but it looks different from a family childcare provider who is providing early learning in their home setting versus a public school setting and the structures they have. Because if you design a system that already gives an edge to the public school setting because of the setting they have, then it's not really a QRS system that is truly believes in the mixed delivery system. So, so that is something that we're looking at. Next slide. As well as having tools in terms of whether kids are learning. That is very important, right? And so, and having a multidimensional instrument that can happen, that is one, developmentally appropriate and happens in natural settings, right? The teacher being able to see a student around a specific learning standard or domain and catching that during a play or catching that during a certain activity, right? Or a small group lesson. And so we have two tools, right? We have our early learning assessment system, that has a set of different standards, being able to provide, assess where children are at. And then we have our kindergarten readiness assessment. The early learning assessment system works within the pre-K setting. It's an optional set of tools. And then our KRA system is essentially looking at ultimately what happens in our early learning setting systems when students come in that fall in kindergarten, and teachers use this multidimensional tool to be able to ultimately assess whether our kids are kinder ready or not. Next slide. Here's what our KRA looks like at that demonstrating readiness level. As you can see, the demonstrating readiness level varies, right? From a high of 73% to a low of 31%. And when you look at it at the system level, and of course there's variation at the school level as well. And so just to get a sense of where we are right now and what that work looks like, as we make sure that we can continue to improve our statewide readiness level in the aggregate. All boats must rise ultimately, especially our historically disadvantaged students. Next slide. So just wanted to give you a summary of all of our strategies, because you will be engaging in a charrette that ranks the strategies. So one, provide increased access to early childhood programs through a mixed delivery system comprised of private and public providers and ensure affordability by subsidizing the cost for families. Two, expand early learning hubs such as Judy and Patty centers that utilize a two-generation approach to ensure families are supported in the development of their child. Three, develop early learning standards that implement age-appropriate learning practices and materials and foster high-quality learning environments for children's social, emotional, and academic growth. And then 4, utilize assessments to monitor readiness and measure the quality of early learning programs to ensure culturally responsive and academically and developmentally appropriate materials, and provide resources to support and empower educators to be successful. And I think with that, I get to stop. Oh, no, one more slide. I am a huge research nerd, so I always share what we're reading. I share what's shaping our thinking. So that is available to you. Some of it is already stuff department has put out, and some of it is just stuff that I have my team look at, and so they get a sense of what's going on in my brain as I benchmark our work against what's happening across the country to get it right for our kids, because they deserve the very best. Thank you very much. And then with that, I'll shift over to my team for the charrette.
Thank you, Superintendent. Before we begin our discussion, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. To indicate you would like to speak, click on the face icon at the bottom of your screen and use your raise hand function. The flagship strategies. The goal is to learn from different perspectives and consider these when ranking the strategies. We ask you to use the same Slido link from the visioning activity to rank the strategies throughout the discussion. You may hear different perspectives that shift your ranking, so you can change your ranking at any time before you hit send. Before answering the question, please introduce yourself by stating your name, role, or position title, and school district or organization. For each of the Ready for Kindergarten strategies, what conditions will be needed for students and educators to be successful with this strategy, especially those who are historically underserved? We want to hear from as many of you as possible, so please be brief but thorough in your responses. So thank you for the brevity. And Lindsay, can you help me out if you see any hands raised that I'm missing?
Yeah, sure. I think we just are having some processing time right now.
Okay, great.
But we definitely have a parent who's joined us tonight. So Christina, if you have any thoughts, we want to put you front and center. If you have thoughts about, what the success look like for the strategies that you just saw, especially the family focus is one of our priorities for sure. And that's Christina Clark.
And if Christina's not ready, we can jump to someone else as well. And I'll just remind you of the question. We're looking at Ready for Kindergarten strategies, and we're asking what conditions will be needed for students and educators to be successful, especially those who are historically underserved. What conditions are necessary for those strategies to be successful?
Dr. Cook, may I say something while people are thinking?
Absolutely. Thank you, President Crawford.
I can't think of a more important role than the role that our participants play. Because if we get it right for children at the beginning, there's a much greater likelihood that they will be successful beyond. And we just ask you to just think creatively. Don't worry about all the things that people tell you, or we can't do that, we don't do that, we don't, it's not what we do here in this area, whatever. If we were going to, we have an opportunity to do something extraordinary. I'll just say this. There was a report given to the Maryland State General Assembly in 1916 had a lot of the same issues that we're dealing with today are still there. And the thing that I ask everybody to think about would be, if someone were to write a report on what happened 100 years from today, and they see these dramatic transformations, I want people to be thinking about, well, what did those people do? We have an opportunity to do something that impacts young children for a lifetime. So please feel free to say what you think. If there's some areas where we need to improve some things as you talk about it, some issues maybe the board needs to look at differently, or the state superintendent or the department, or whether there's an area where we need to get some different legislation or whatever, please feel free to put those ideas on the table. We value your knowledge and your contributions, and we are listening and paying real attention to what you would have to say. Thank you, Dr. Cook.
Absolutely. Thank you, President Crawford. Abigail, can I pass it to you?
Sure, if I can unmute. So, hi, I'm Abigail Porcher. I'm from Kent County, and I am a special education teacher here. So what conditions will be needed for students and educators to be successful? One of the things that really stands out to me as especially a new teacher, this is only my 3rd year teaching, is that to have these high quality lessons and these high quality experiences for kids to engage in, is we need the time to plan and gather the materials and have all the resources so that they can then just come to the table and engage with the materials and learn. But really having that extra planning time, I think, would be really beneficial for teachers. And I know Kent County is already doing this, but having all kids have access to pre-K is huge. There are so many kids out there, and I think it'll help with the blueprint, that just have no exposure to those basic skills. Sorry, I'm reading now, but I can let someone else go.
Thanks, Abigail. I'll pass it to Wendy. Wendy, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I was going to say something very similar to Abby, is making sure that we have the planning, but I was also thinking about the underserved populations and what happens before they come to pre-K. What happens between birth to 3 that we may be missing, because a lot of our underserved families are not necessarily engaging in high quality early childhood centers. And they're staying home with grandparents, with aunts, with multiple family members due to the poverty. And especially in very rural counties like Kent County, there's not many options for our families. And the options we do have fill up very, very fast, and there are long waiting lists.
Thank you, Wendy. Christina?
Hi. So when I'm just going to piggyback, if that's okay. I agree with Wendy. Here in Caroline County, we have maybe 2 centers, and then the rest are home centers, or you also have the Judy centers. I have a 3-year-old, and after COVID hit, those were the rooms that were being shut down and so on and so forth. And I had a part-time job, so I couldn't afford to send my little one to daycare. So my dad, actually, he's with his grandfather all day. So I'm looking forward to the expansion of pre-K and seeing what that's like through the blueprint.
Thank you, Christina. I'll pass to Erica, but before I do, I want to throw in another question for you all to think about. What are your biggest concerns about the strategies? Erica?
Hi, so I have kind of two-prong approach to this, because I work for the school system in Caroline County, but I also am a parent of a toddler and a 6-year-old. So I have experience with the public pre-K program in Caroline because I work there, and also my 6-year-old went through the program. And so of course I love pre-K, and I would, share the benefits with everybody. I think for what Christina said and Wendy said about the availability of high quality care here on the shore, and maybe in more rural areas of Maryland, that is something that we need more of. And I think it's the outreach is needed, and the like Dr. Choudhury said, the incentivizing having the high quality care. I guess my concern on the flip side is still just that outreach. How do we motivate daycare providers to want to have higher ratings? We have a lot of home daycares who don't have any ratings for Excel. So as a parent of an almost 2-year-old, the options are very limited. And I know that, going into pre-K, even kindergarten, it's really important that he has some kind of structured care. So I think the strategies and the concerns are kind of similar.
Thank you, Erica. Darlene?
Good evening. My name is Darlene Schmidt. I'm working with Child Care Choices as an early childhood coach. And along with Erica, I think we need higher quality childcare, and that's something that I, try to work with. But there's several areas that I find that we're lacking in. One is the number of family childcare programs. So we need some more incentives for people to want to become a family childcare or to operate a center. And then we need some way to encourage them, once they do open a child care, that they will want to participate in Maryland Excels. And the fact that you all were talking about changing the standards, I think is much needed, because I used to be a quality assurance specialist for Maryland Excel. So I'm familiar with the standards, and I know that there are certain hurdles that the providers have such a hard time getting over to get to the next level. And we really need to, work and try to streamline the whole process where it's doable for the providers, but not lose the quality in the process. And so that's my biggest thing is, I really think we need to strive for the quality and more childcare providers.
Thank you, Darlene. Any other thoughts? Elizabeth?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Saylor. I am the supervisor of instruction for early childhood in Caroline County, and kind of mimicking what you've heard from the other members of my team. We definitely have a need for those private providers, but I will tell you one thing that we have is we have a partnership with the Aspire program, which is helping 2 of our private providers become those or to become the private providers and meet all the criteria. So that's definitely helpful. But I know I had just probably last week had a phone call with another provider who was like, that sounds really good, but I don't even know where to start. So it's definitely about making sure we have those conversations and things. But I also know our Judy Center, our early learning hub, is very dedicated to finding those private providers and supporting them as much as they can, and having some of those home daycares kind of take the next step to go. But again, with it just seems to be that the way that our county is laid out, we have a lot of space between locations and schools. And so transportation is an issue for families as well. So we definitely want to provide that mixed delivery system, but we run into, a few issues, and just, space, people, transportation, all the above. But I know we do have some people out there that want to do it, and it's good that we are able to do the partnerships and provide the trainings and so forth. But I think, one of my biggest things that I've had conversations with our private providers, and it's kind of just, how do we mimic that school setting in their home? And really, how do they get to where we are, where it takes, all the accreditation and things like that. So definitely the piece with the collaboration is crucial. But I think if we can work out some of those little things and make it a little more consistent, it would be better for us moving forward and just having more opportunities for our families.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Chris, Push.
Yes, thank you. I had a question related to comments for Maryland Excels, and I agree with all my colleagues, but is there any, I know it's difficult to track because we don't have a system in place, but due to the standards and the accountability portion and data and research, how are we able to quantify whether a child attending levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, how they're performing in, when they do move, to the public school system, because that would help us in revamping and what is working and what isn't. So I'm just wondering if there's any thought to tracking the success or the readiness for children that are coming from these various levels of programs.
Absolutely. So one way to do that is through a validation study. And we are looking into doing a validation study of the QRS system once we've put in place some updates to that system. So thank you for that question. Excellent. Tess?
Hi. Yes. Just thinking about just thinking about our high need families, our families that are at risk. Though I do believe we need more access to mixed delivery system. I'm in a community where we have majority family childcare, and a lot have died out since COVID, since the pandemic. But if you're thinking about early identification, helping parents where they are, especially if they are experiencing needs, the Judy Centers and the Patty Centers are doing that. They are not only just providing the early learning support. If the child is staying with grandma, the abuela, they can come to the Judy Center. They can come. It doesn't just have to be the parent. They can bring the child there, but the parents can get the food support, the clothing support, those hands-on things that help them, that usually takes their mind off of their needs, their troubles that they're going through. I think that's one of the successes, and I'm not being a bias because I am a Judy Center coordinator, but I've been teaching for Baltimore City Public Schools for over 25 years. And I just know the earlier we can connect with children and really connect with families, especially when they're struggling, a family that is focused on food security, housing, unfortunately, the last thing they're thinking about is what their children are doing during the day when they're at work. So if we can meet that need there, we can see greater success. You're getting more bang for your buck if you go back earlier. And those are just my thoughts.
Thank you, Tess. We appreciate those comments. Anyone from Worcester County have any comments? I think that's the only county we haven't heard from.
Hi, I'm Diane Shorts. We have the same issues as everyone else. Our county is a very wide spanning county. In the north end, we have quite a few. 3 of our childcare centers are participating in the expansion grant. However, childcare centers in our southern 2 ends of our county are closing. Head Starts are struggling. And so what we're trying to do right there is just expand within our schools. And just like everyone else, I'm sure they're running into issues of space. We don't have extra space in our buildings in order to increase the pre-K classrooms. And so it's money, it's time, it's having enough people to go out and help the childcare providers that are in our area. So I think we all struggle the same way as everybody else is.
Thanks, Diane. Is Menda?
Good evening. I'm Ms. Minda Johnson from Baltimore City, Judy Center Coordinator. And I was wondering one thing about what Ms. Tess said and others have said about the children and families. So we do know there's a lack of childcare centers in certain counties, but in some schools we have plenty of seats for pre-K and early learning children, and they don't fill those seats. And I was wondering if there's some kind of database that tells us where the children are, so that this family has this number of children, this age, living at this address. Because, oftentimes we have plenty of seats and they're not filling the seats. I know in our district anyway, in Baltimore City. So, but we don't have no way of knowing where those children are. And we know they're there, but we have no way of knowing where they are, if they're in the home, their location. So a system where we can figure out exactly where those children are and their families.
Thank you for that comment. It's very important. Wendy, I think you raised your hand again.
I did, thank you. I wanted to say, Ismenda, that that's probably one of the strongest comments that we can all say, because we know that these children are out there and they're not coming in through early intervention, they're not coming in through pre-K, and then we find out when it's mandatory at kindergarten for some of our children that, whoa, there's a child out there, and being the director of special education, you're all of a sudden realizing that they also have a significant disability, and now we have missed the first 4 years of that child's life. Or they think they can't come to pre-K because they're not potty trained. So parents aren't bringing their kids, and then they don't know what to do with them at 5. And we still have pediatricians who are playing the wait and see game. So I think if there was something that you said tonight that probably would be something that would be a big takeaway, and probably the biggest barrier to this work, it's that not knowing some of these kids are out there or where to find these kids.
Thank you for that, Wendy. Tracy, Jillian, or Rosemary, do you have any other comments that you'd like to add?
No, I mean, just piggybacking on everybody else's, especially finding them. I think we're a very small school, we're very rural. So that, I think that's really poignant.
Thank you, Jillian. Tracy?
Yeah, Tracy from Garrett County. So I'm the director of a Head Start program, and just highlighting the importance of collaboration, especially with the blueprint and the opportunity for 3-year-old children in those programs. Garrett County is taking a unique approach to, not compete for those children, but collaboratively serve them to meet all their needs. I think we can definitely recognize that, the public school system's strength is in educating the children. And Head Start strength is recognizing parents, as their children's teachers also. So when we can collaborate and meet both of those needs, Head Start supporting the family and that tie to school, and, the school is really taking the lead in the educating of the child, we can have great programs with a lot of success. And our data in the county shows that our, the children the most ready on KRA, children most ready on the assessments we're using in Head Start are those in collaborative programming. So as this model moves forward, and we're looking at private providers, we're looking at Head Start programs, we're looking at family child cares, just making sure they're not left behind in this, and recognizing the strengths they can bring to the table with these initiatives.
Thank you, Tracy. And thanks for closing us out on that comment. Such a strong comment around collaboration. So important. Now that we have explored the potential successes, challenges, and equity issues related to the Ready for Kindergarten priority, rank the strategies using Slido and press the send button to submit. On the screen, you can see how participants ranked the strategies.
And you can still go ahead and rank those if you haven't already. You can see that the first two are really close. So it'd be interesting if we get more rankings to see how you all prioritize these.
And it looks like the top two rankings are develop early learning standards and ensure that we have increased access to early childhood programs through a mixed delivery system. So thank you all for ranking those items. To our participants and those of you viewing on YouTube Live, the State Board and MSDE, thank you for joining us tonight for the Ready for Kindergarten Charette. If you'd like to learn more about the strategic plan, please visit the website strategicplan.marylandpublicschools.org. Your feedback will continue to guide the ongoing development of the strategic plan. We need as many Marylanders as possible to give your input. So please complete and share the strategic plan survey at marylandpublicschools.org/survey. We will post both of those links in the roundtable and YouTube chats. Thank you again to the Charette participants for your time this evening and for sharing your expertise and experience. We appreciate the time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Cook.
Okay, thanks.